Okay, in 5, 6, 7, 8. We're back, everybody. This is the Smart in Public podcast. This is a podcast that discusses business, careers, life through the eyes of public relations and communications experts. I'm Katy Boyson,
And I'm Katy Dufficy.
and we've nailed that intro, I feel like, by now.
Back, baby.
We're getting it. We're back, baby. So we we're gonna dive right in, mostly because both of us have a hard stop when we're recording after to go to meetings, but also because we want to get to the meat. So all of this swirl around Blue Origin, like we couldn't help ourselves. This is a hot take episode, baby. I wish we had an air horn so I could go.
I know we need like a hot take, like sound effect.
Sound effect.
You just did it with your voice. So great.
Exactly. Hot take air horn happening. So here's what I'm thinking, Dufficy. Let me walk us into what's happening.
Yes.
I'm
For
going to
those
try.
who are uninitiated into the Blue Origin story, take us there.
The Blue Origin story. Blue Origin means Earth, by the way. I looked that up on their website. Well, I saw it as I was on their website. Let's just say that. I wasn't curious about the name at all. Okay, so let me just talk about what's actually happening for you that didn't want to do a deep dive like the two of us did. We'll just save you some time. So here we go. So I almost went 5, 6, 7, 8 again. It just comes naturally to me. So my dickhead response is for what is happening with Blue Origin is really 6 women flew into space for 11 minutes on a penis-shaped rocket funded by one of the richest men in the world. That is me in a nutshell, having my mark on. Le summarizer. Yes. So let me talk about the women that were selected. We'll go into kind of, some of the other details that way. So the women that were on the flight crew was Katy Perry, Gail King. For all of you that don't know who Gail is, that are, playing along outside of the US, she's an award-winning journalist. She's the co-host of like CBS Morning. So like if you watch the morning show with like Jennifer Aniston and like Reese Witherspoon, it's like that kind of morning show. And she's the editor at large of Oprah Daily, but she's also just known as being Oprah's best friend. Like she got her big break on Oprah, like coming in and being like Gail from next door, Lauren Sanchez was on the flight crew. She's a journalist, author, pilot, and also the fiance of Jeff Bezos. Aisha Bowe, a former NASA rocket scientist, entrepreneur, and STEM advocate, was on the flight crew, as well as Amanda Nguyen, a bioastronautics research scientist and activist for sexual violence survivors, and Carrie Ann Flynn, a filmmaker and community builder, who I didn't realize there were 6 women there. I thought there were 5.
Doesn't that say something about the PR as well?
Yeah, kudos to you, Carrie Ann. Good job for getting on there. So, interesting kind of group and crew. An interesting mix. And I was having a poke around thinking like there was going to be some kind of formula for who they chose. But it was really what they said was they wanted to select, they carefully curated a crew of public figures and like women that were doing things for good for the world, essentially.
Wonderful. How good of them. Can you tell I'm cynical on this?
I know. I'm really trying hard not to be, but it's going to be.
So they go into space. Yep.
Curated space. Here's something that's interesting though. Like I wanted to understand. So what is Blue Origin trying to actually achieve through all of this? So they have 3 missions on their website. One is radically reduce the cost of access to space. So reusability, they say, is the key to radically reducing the cost of space flight. 2, harness the vast resources of space. So Blue Origin is learning to harness materials found in space to enable future exploration. And the 3rd is to inspire and mobilize future generations. Founded by Blue Origin Club of the Future is a not-for-profit with a mission to inspire and mobilize. So that's kind of like bringing up the future of the next generation of astronauts.
Yeah, and I did see for this particular flight, they kind of had this mission statement of holding space for women in space was kind of the tagline. And I guess, from the Blue Origin perspective, they were trying to empower and inspire that sort of next generation of women for space travel and space exploration. So that's kind of where they started in terms of why they did this.
Which sounds great, which is kind of like leads me to my next area of like, so why is this so problematic? Like, why is everybody absolutely just taking a dump all over what happened? So the first one is NASA is in flux. So on April 11th, it was announced that NASA is being faced with massive budget cuts in the White House in a White House proposal. The agency's science programs would see a 50% reduction with a 20% cut to NASA overall.
Yeah.
So there's that happening at the time that Blue Origin is taking off. I think also the key messages, it's not only like what's happening in the background and like the sign of the times, but also just what the women decided to focus on in their interviews was, I think, one, what made headlines, because that is kind of the world that we're living in right now of like, how hard can we hate on the women? Let's make fun of them about, them talking about their hair. But also on the other side, it's like, why are you talking about your hair? I think, instead of the women promoting the importance of women in STEM in their interviews at a time where like the government is defunding NASA and we need to like show up for that, they talked about hair, outfits, that sort of thing. Can I read you a quote that I pulled from The Guardian?
Please do.
So, and just there's so much snark in this quote as well, because it's The Guardian that wrote this, which is also something that I want to talk to you about. So in an interview with Elle, the crew members paid lip service to the importance of women, and particularly women of color in STEM. The Trump administration has forced NASA to close some offices in order to comply with its ban on the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs that would recruit such candidates. But mostly, they seemed interested in talking about their makeup and hair. Quote, "Space is going to finally be glam," Katy Perry said bizarrely. "Let me tell you something. If I could take glam up with me, I would do that. We are going to put the ass in astronaut," unquote. Your face.
Oh, God.
Next quote. "Who would not want to get glam before the flight?" asked Sanchez. "We're going to have lash extensions flying in the capsule." That was hilarious to me. I thought that was funny. Bo, too, joined in, saying that she had gone to extreme lengths to make sure that she would be, of all things, well coiffed for the experience. Quote, "I skydived in Dubai with similar hair to make sure I would be good. I took it for a dry run," she said.
I'm a little bit speechless. I'm not going to lie. Look, okay. I feel like this hot take, there's so much to unpack. And I'm gonna try and like distill my thoughts on this, because I think, this is a PR podcast. So I want to kind of have a think about it from a like Blue Origin perspective, like as a brand, as a company, what do I think is kind of, has it worked? Has it not worked? Where have they landed as a company? And then I think there's kind of the women themselves and their brands. And
how has this impacted that?
Yeah. And I think there's kind of those two angles. But I think the interesting thing for me about this stuff, right, is like, okay, in the lead up to it, Blue Origin did a lot of PR as well, and kind of that they were doing this flight, that this flight was going to be an all-female crew. And so I think in the lead up, if you look at some of the coverage, it's actually quite positive, because at that point they sort of hadn't named, very early on, they hadn't named who was going. They were kind of talking about doing this. And I think in its essence, its intentions, if, its stated intentions of empowering women and holding space for women in space, that sounds like a really great intention. And I think some of the initial coverage was quite positive. I think it's interesting who they chose, but also within that, who they then focused on as part of the people they chose.
Right.
And I think what happened is when you put someone like Katy Perry in there, love her or hate her, that's going to create a lot of media, and people are going to want to talk to her about it and her experience. Amanda Nguyen, who was on the flight, has a really interesting story, a really empowering story. She's a survivor of sexual assault. She's done some really great work to push through legislation around sexual assault and rape kits. and you can go and have a look at the work that she's done in that. She was also studying to be an astronaut, and then she put that on pause to push this through as a survivor. She's also the first Vietnamese woman in space. And so, like, I look at that and I go, that's a really empowering story.
Yeah.
And I had to find that afterwards. Like, that's not in there. Like, they didn't lean into that. They kind of had her there, but I didn't feel like they were saying, like, this is the person that should be fronting these discussions. And then they have like Kris Jenner and Khloe Kardashian at the pre-launch. Like,
yeah.
what?
One thing that's really interesting to me is like with the Blue Origin motion of, trying to promote women in STEM and leading that way. And then if I were Katy Perry's publicist and I saw that that was the direction that they are going to take, as Katy Perry's publicist, the attention that you can bring to an issue.
Yeah.
And she's been getting heat up and down the field for like the last couple of years, I would say. I actually did a Google that we can dive into later of why does everybody hate Katy Perry? And the responses that I came back with are ridiculous. Anyway, so if I were her publicist, I would say, hey, KP, like, let's lean in to the other women here. If the whole goal is promoting women, why wouldn't you then say, listen, I'm along for the ride. I love space. I love the idea, but what I would love for you to focus on is Amanda. I would love, or I would love for you to focus on any of these three women. Listen to their stories. Like, take your platform and give them your platform, and that's how you make change with that message.
I agree. And I think you do, to some extent, need an element of celebrity. I think you definitely need a diverse group of women, which they did. Like, there are things that they did. I just don't know that they used it in the right way. And then to your point, why must we always be reduced to talking about outfits and hair? Like, you just would not have that with a male crew. Like, it just wouldn't happen. So is that the women driving that? Is that the media? I think it's a bit of both. Like, I think there's an element of the media want to have that vision of women in space and talk about that. But if I was them, I would have really lent into, like, this is a momentous occasion for women, and we don't need to talk about what our hair looks like. It actually doesn't matter. Like, I wish they'd said that, because
I agree. And I also think that, like, you hear so loudly of like the Brie Larson interviews where somebody asks her about her weight loss or something like that in a role and she pushes back. Like, why couldn't we have had that moment and like had a little bit more substance? It's interesting because one very strongly opinionated kind of view that I read on this is the reflection of the America and like the misogyny that Trump is saying is acceptable, of like, put pretty women back in their pretty little place and let them fly up to space for 11 minutes and like, but make sure they're cute while they do it. Like, that was one article that I read where I was like, I get it, but like, surely I just can't live my life being that cynical.
Yeah, and like, and not to take away from, like, I do think there's women who went on that flight who have really interesting stories and who deserve to have an experience in space. And, I think Amanda was quoted as saying, like, I did this for my younger self who had to pause my dream to fight this other battle. And so, like, I don't want to take away from that. What I think is interesting is like the Jeff Bezos role in all of this and the money. Yeah. And I think the money piece, and to your point about NASA, like, if they really, like, the privatization of space in general, and obviously you have SpaceX and you have Blue Origin, and both of them run by billionaire white men, like, what else are they doing to support women in space? How are they investing in colleges, in universities, in STEM? Like, do they really care? Like, that's, I guess, my question. And I probably don't know enough about Blue Origin and what they're investing in, but my guess is they're not doing a huge amount, and the cost of that whole exercise maybe would have been better spent somewhere else.
Yeah.
I think ultimately you've got to remember they're also promoting space tourism, and that they want people, ultimately, rich people, to buy tickets to go on these flights.
Yeah.
So there's still a business, right? And there's a business objective behind all of this. And so, yes, they've kind of got this, like, it's about women and it's about empowering women, but ultimately it's also about showcasing what they can do to rich people. And so I think just having that in mind and being cynical about, like, are they doing enough and what are they doing? And the fact that, like, you know, in this cost of living crisis, people are really struggling. Like, this is not something that is achievable for pretty much the majority of America, let alone, you know, other
Yeah.
nations. But so it just felt a bit ick in that
Yeah.
environment as well. Like, it just cost a shit ton of money, paid for by a billionaire, with
Hmm.
these women in their, you know, So I think there's a bit of ick around that as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think if I were a Blue Origin's comms team, like the message that I would have focused around was like at a time where NASA is being defunded, like COVID, now is time for private sector to step up and take over where public sector is not able to lead. You
Yeah.
know, like we saw that message with a lot of businesses, you know, during COVID times or like, you know, and I think that we could potentially have that moment with Blue Origin saying, you know, this, but of course, because of Bezos's, you know, being Bezos being under Trump's thumb, that sort of thing, like that message would never come to light. I also think
No.
that like in the future, if I were Blue Origin's PR team, I would focus real hard on that foundation. I would be like, what are our stats? What is
Yeah.
our momentum in the foundation? How are we actually driving like STEM education with young girls? And what are the numbers and like what does the progress look like and what does the roadmap look like?
Yeah, I would have pushed for like a co-announcement at the time of the flight.
Yeah,
Like, this flight cost this much money to do,
commitment.
and we're going to match that same amount of money and we're going to put it into STEM, university, whatever it might be. We're going to fund a whole bunch of PhD students who are
Fuck, that would
studying.
be so cool.
Yeah,
That's such a
like
good
just,
idea.
you know, we're going to take the cost of that. And then like there's a whole discussion around the environmental impacts as well, which I've read a bunch of stuff around too.
Yeah, I saw sustainability is now in question with like all the stuff that they were saying.
Yeah, so like okay, I'm going to have a look at it from Blue Origin's point of view.
Okay.
Let's just, from Blue Origin's point of view, they've had a shit ton of coverage, right?
Yep.
Some of it good, and then now we've kind of seen this turn and there's a lot of bad. But if I'm Blue Origin, I guess my question is, do you care? Because people are still talking about it. Really, your end goal is space tourism, let's be honest, and money, because it's Jeff Bezos. So if I'm a rich person, has it put me off going there? Probably not.
No.
Has it put me off buying a ticket? Probably not. So I'm going to guess the comms team might not be feeling great, but Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos, probably doesn't care. I think it's done more damage to Katy Perry's image.
Yep.
And so I guess to your point, like there's a whole story there in itself of like where has Katy Perry come from and gone to.
Yeah.
I do think it's really interesting that, and we're kind of doing it too, so I'm gonna, you know, be honest about that. But like a lot of the stories are ripping into the women.
I know.
Not necessarily Jeff Bezos. So I'm kind of like, hey, let's go back to the guy.
That guy's the dick.
And the company and what they're doing, as opposed to like, Katy Perry's Katy Perry. Like, I don't know that she's going to change. Like, you know, she's a bit loop-de-doop and, you know, maybe that's what they wanted. Someone who would kiss the earth when they landed back down on it and, you know, say some stuff. But I guess, like, part of me is like, okay, the women are the women. It is what it is. Let's not shoot them down. Like, they had an experience. I wish she'd used, as you said, her platform to like just direct it at the other women. I wish we'd heard the other women's stories right up front without having people having to share them afterwards for us all to be like, oh, that actually is really interesting.
Yeah.
You know, there just wasn't enough, I think, on why those women were selected versus the celebrity.
Yeah.
You know, and I think Gail brings that kind of, you know, every woman, you know, diversity kind of piece in it. And I think that's great. I just wish we'd heard a little bit more about why these other people were selected and why that's important and what that means for women in space. But
yeah, I agree. I think for like, I didn't mind Gail so much on there. I was like, cool news moment, like great for your show. Like, let's get the live stream.
An obvious broadcast. Yeah, like that makes sense to me, right? Yeah.
I super get it. Like, however, I read a response that our statement that she responded with in a Variety article that just came out. Can I just read this to you?
Yeah.
Because I read it and I went super sour. Like I recoiled. And my printout's a bit wacky, so just bear with me. Okay. I think it's good that we can really, okay, so the headline is, Gail King responds in Variety article, I wish people would do more due diligence. And she said, I think that we can really, I think it's good that we can really address it because I was one of those people before I went on this flight and before I became educated. Why, why are we spending so much money on space when there's so much to do on Earth? I was one of those people. However, King said her mind changed when she looked at what Blue Origin does and what their intention is, which she said is to, quote, figure out a way to harness the waste here and put it in space to make Earth a better place. King noted that we use space technology all the time via GPS and satellites, and that every time a flight goes up, they can get some type of information that can be used for something else. I'm like confused by what Gail thinks is going on here, by the way. Like, this is not in line with anything of Blue Origin's mission, but that's neither here nor there. So let me just, so she continued, I wish people would do more due diligence. And then my question is, have y'all been to space? Go to space or go to the Blue Origin and see what they do and then come back and say, this is a terrible thing.
Yeah.
So let me just scream from the rooftop really quick because I then went and I was like, how much did this cost to go in space? So Blue Origin doesn't publicly list ticket prices on its website, but they are estimated to range from $0 to public figures to $30 million, according to a 2021 auction. While some passengers have paid nothing or had their cost sponsors, others have paid upwards of $28 million for a seat on the first flight. Recent reports suggest that prices could be in the range of $200,000 to $300,000 per person for future flights. Fully refundable deposit of $150,000 is required to reserve a seat. So Gail, like, yeah, let me just get right up into space and then prove you wrong.
Yeah. Gail.
That's the most fucking shit response I've ever heard in my life. I'm sorry.
Also, Gail, your seat was paid for. So no, I haven't been to space because I don't have a spare, whatever it's gonna cost me. But also, I understand what she's saying about people hating before reading. I do think we're in a culture of like, you're all annoying. I'm just gonna hate on this before I've even done any research. I get what she's saying about that, but I guess it falls down when she's like, have y'all been to space? Well, no.
Oh my God.
And you were paid to go on this trip and you didn't pay for it. And people are struggling to feed their kids. Like that's like you're missing the point on where people are at from a cost of living perspective, groceries, like rent, buying a home. And I mean, I'm sure it's like that's in America, but it's definitely like that in Australia right now. Home ownership is very hard to achieve. Rent is challenging for people. Like some perspective on like what that costs or will cost people, and that is not accessible to the majority of people ever in their entire lifetime.
Yeah. Her response
for it
could have been so simple and perfect. It could have been something like, I am incredibly honored that I was selected to be on this flight crew. I realized that this is an experience that not many people are going to have. I was skeptical at first. I believe in their mission, and I would encourage other people to get involved. Like, here's their nonprofit foundation. Go have a look at how you can support. Like, it's bigger than just space travel, like commercial space travel. They're really trying to do something.
They're trying to do some good for the world, and like,
that's all you could have said.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, look. There's a lot of
so
and like
humility, and I think that's the other thing is like I think the ego and the lack of self-awareness that celebrity brings to this derives responses like that.
Yes, I agree. And the irony that all of those celebrities that were on there, they could have probably afforded it themselves.
Yeah.
So, there's a disparity there. I just wish they'd done it with all people that had a great, like, interesting space story. Like, a PhD student, whoever, right? Like they've got a few of those people. I guess that I think they thought they needed the celebrity to get the PR.
Can I be super cynical for a second, given this is a hot take? I honestly think that Lauren wanted to go up and wanted to bring her friends.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm
And
gonna be
then they
honest.
were like,
We haven't even got to the fact that
it's
Lauren was on it, and I'm like, why are you on it? Like, can't
I
you
know.
go anytime? It's
But
your
they're like,
fiance.
they're like,
Like,
well, Lauren, we know you only have 2 friends, but there's 6 seats, so we'll fill the other 3. You can bring your 2 friends.
yeah, I mean, yeah, this is a
Okay,
hot
now
take.
I'm being mean.
We can be as cynical as we want. I do wonder. I don't know. Why is
Okay.
she on it? Like, why is she on it? Like, couldn't she have like
Well,
sponsored
she is
it
a
and been like,
pilot, technically.
yeah, I
Like,
know she has her own achievements, and I think sometimes, to be fair to her, she gets reduced to Jeff Bezos' fiance a lot, and
yeah.
she does have her own achievements. She was a journalist for a long time. Like, I'm not taking away anything from her as an individual woman. I
Yeah.
do question whether that seat should have gone to someone else. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. Here's the other question that I have.
Yeah.
Now that we've covered Gail,
Yeah.
is why does everybody hate Katy Perry? This was a question, and I want to talk about it from her publicity as well. And we kind of already touched on her ability to be able to like let go of her ego and shine a spotlight on other people and the opportunity that
Mhm.
would present. But I just did some digging, and like for the sake of gossip, can I just like read you some of this
Please.
stuff and tell me if you've heard of
Go
this?
to a Katy Perry deep dive.
Oh my God. So I took to threads on this one, and
Oh.
here's what the world came back with. Haley Toner Hair replied.
Great name. Great.
I became pretty unimpressed with her after she pretty much assaulted a young boy auditioning for American Idol a few years ago. So I looked into this because I don't watch American Idol.
No idea.
And I was also not living in America when this happened. But she apparently like force kissed a guy on American Idol, like a younger dude, and he was trying to get away, and she like made him.
Okay.
Okay, so I mean, a lot of people mentioned that, which is why I added it, because a lot of people were like, "That rubbed me the wrong way. I did not like that." So maybe that was like the beginning of the end. Yeah. Lola Paluha, a play on Lollapalooza, I feel like. Said, personally for me, is when she complained about Lady Gaga using religious imagery to further her career, like she herself hadn't queer baited herself into relevancy, and then she killed a nun over a house.
Yeah.
So I was like, let's start with the nun. Did you hear about this?
I vaguely remember this. Yes.
Playing along at home, everybody. Let me just read this little blurb.
Please.
I was in stitches. You can imagine me laughing to myself, like as I'm reading this. Sister Catherine Rose Holtzman, a nun who was involved in a property dispute with Perry, collapsed and died in court during a hearing related to the case. She was 89 years old. The nuns were trying to block Perry from buying their convent, and Sister Holtzman was interviewed just before her death expressing her opposition to the sale.
Wow.
I was in stitches. I was like, what? I'm sorry. I was like, I gotta stop watching so much MSNBC and like going to People magazine.
I vaguely remember hearing about the nun dying, but yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah, I didn't know the whole story. Wow.
Yeah, Katy was trying to buy their convent at a house and home.
Where are the nuns going to go if you buy the convent? They've taken the power of poverty, haven't they?
The nun in the publishing house in Elf, where she's like, but the children love the books. Anyways, like a lot came back, you guys, like with what was happening on the Why We Hate Katy Perry.
Is it? I don't know. She's a hard one, I think, because to some extent she does it to herself. Well, I mean, and just an example, some of the stuff she said around the book, but also like, okay, whose idea was it for her to sing What a Wonderful World? Like, was that her idea? Was that their idea? Like, that was just so cheese and cringe. And like, I get it, you're a singer, but like, so I guess there I go, did you come up with that idea? Or is that someone telling you to do that? And why do you not have better advice? It's like, hey, you don't need to like turn this into a singing moment. What a wonderful world.
I was thinking about this on my walk today, and I was like, what if just like aliens for that moment were watching and they're like, what's this thing in space? And then they saw these women screaming and jumping up and down and then holding a daisy and passing a stuffed animal around and then singing, and it's only been 11 minutes and then all of a sudden it's back down. Like, and they were like, what the fuck was that? It's almost like when a bug hits your windshield and they're
Yeah,
like, what
you'll be
the?
like,
Scared me.
yeah. Is that what the human race is doing these days? Wow.
You're like, steer
Yeah,
clear of that place.
I don't know. I just think I don't know. Maybe she's just crossed into like crazy, celebrity territory where they just lose touch with reality a little bit.
I don't know. I feel like we're bashing really hard now. We need to back it out. We need to rein it
and
in.
like at the end of the day, like, I don't know. I think it'd
Let
be
go
relevant to be in the spotlight, and Katy Perry, you do you, girl. But yeah, there is a movement around her, and this has not helped her cause. Let's just say that.
No. So, do you have any kind of closing thoughts? Like, what are in this hot take, what do you want to leave the group with?
A couple of things. Like, if I just take from a comms perspective, I think ultimately Blue Origin will not be disappointed with the outcome of this, right? That's my opinion. I don't think they will necessarily be disappointed even with some of the backlash that's happening. However, if I was them, I would be leaning really heavily now into some of those real stories. So I would be starting to think about how we tell a foundation story, how we start to talk about what we're actually investing in, to the point about they're not just space tourism, like how do we lean into some of these other stories so that this whole idea of like we're more than just this starts to become a reality. That's probably what I would do, is like move forward from this flight, start to lean into those real impactful stories. If they are doing something around the earth and waste and all that sort of stuff, how do you tell that story? I'd probably like sort of just slow my roll on some of the other female stuff and just really lean into in those other parts of their business. But like I said, I'm not sure that they're really that concerned that this is like, at the end of the day, I think this has been a big publicity movement for them, and that may not damage their ultimate goal of selling seats on these flights at some point. I wish we had heard from the other women more strongly, and I wish they'd done that from the get-go. And I wish, to your point, the celebrities had used that opportunity to really, or even just to tell some more interesting stories about women in space. Like, why didn't we use that time to, like, I would have loved for them to all have told a story about a significant woman who has done something for space exploration. Like, and maybe we could have had a whole like week or movement around women in space and why we need to be investing and what that looks like. But it just didn't. It was just about, so yeah, those are my kind of like, I wish that had happened.
Yeah. I also wish that because they got a free trip, I wish that the people that could have afforded the flights donated to the foundation. Like, I wish that
I wish, and I don't know why that just seems like it would have been
a no-brainer, right?
Yeah. And I guess the like final thing I will say is like, a whole female crew going into space for 11 minutes is still cool. And we should be celebrating it. And I just wish it had been done in a bit of a different way, but that shouldn't take away from the fact that it was done. And that is an achievement. And so, I do want to like, just, I guess, I don't want to take it away, particularly from those other women in that flight who have worked their whole life in that space.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they deserve that moment. And so let's not take that from them. But Blue Origin, get your shit together.
I also just wish that, like, from the celebrity standpoint, the ego could have gone away and just realized, like, this is a bigger moment than just me going into space. Like, how many funny memes could Katy Perry have made about, like, you're not the expert here? Like, she could have just, like, brought the other women that were actually the scientists and stuff to the forefront. Like, how many funny memes could she have done off of White Lotus of like, I'm just happy to have a seat at the table, like it could have been so good. Like, they could have gotten creative and had a lot of fun with that. And granted, the press tour started much longer before the White Lotus thing kind of came out, but still, like, there's that opportunity to have that humility and humbleness and realize that maybe you're not the most interesting person right now. Like, these people have great stories to tell, and you're just here for the ride. So I would say that to anyone that's in publicity, like, let's start thinking about how we kind of bring our celebrities into humility and, Like that's giving other women the stage when people actually came to see you is actually the true girl power kind of like feminism movement we want.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes. That would have been the feminist moment we could have all rallied around.
Yep. All right. Well, that
Nailed
was
it.
fun. I felt like that was very productive. We got through all my notes, which
Love
is
it.
great.
I mean, listen, if you're on the Blue Origin comms team, we say this
have a
every time
comms
we
team
do
that's
like we
also.
rip into something. We're like, please do get in contact if you'd like to talk. But
We
seriously,
would love to hear from you. And if you have a topic you want us to chat through, if you have thoughts or any other additional insights, like please let us know. You can email us at hello@smartandpublicpod.com. We're on Instagram, TikTok, we're on LinkedIn. You can find us anywhere that you get your podcast. Please listen, rate, review, and subscribe. And, we'll just talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.